This video is brought to you by NordVPN. Anonymize and protect your online traffic today by clicking the link in the description and using the coupon code BestGuyEver to get 73% off a 2-year subscription with 4 bonus months free. I've been using them for years and they sponsor this channel, so love you boys. Now on to the video. Engage. What is up, United Federation of Planet Citizens? It's me, Captain Bestman, here on this scenic Earth boardwalk, and I'm here today to talk about Star Trek. What is Star Trek? Well, if you ask this simple Starfleet lawyer, only the best sci-fi series ever written, depicting a futuristic vision of what humanity might achieve once we've hitched a ride out to the stars beyond our one lonely world. The series has spawned a vast number of individual shows, movies, books, comics, and games, though none of those are good, and I'm here today to enlighten you on the one that holds a special place in my heart, Star Trek: The Next Generation. As a kid, I always enjoyed shows like TNG or Voyager whenever I caught them on syndication, but around a decade ago, a couple of hack frauds made some reviews clowning on some of the old TNG movies, and they got me thinking it was about time to go experience the full ride for myself. Once I started, I was hooked on the universe, cultures, stories, and characters from all over the franchise that showed a future where humanity had grown enough to become a part of a larger, galactic community, with science fiction concepts that got you thinking about the wonders that might lie in wait out in the unknown for the intrepid members of Starfleet to explore. And rather than featuring characters that reject the ineffable qualities that make us human, like we should lobotomize ourselves to be like the purely logical Vulcans, or condemn ourselves for our violent past, Trek is more like a celebration of the advancement of the human character, urging us to continue to improve, but with a decidedly optimistic outlook, that our species has the capacity to reach further greatness if we discipline ourselves as we continue to grow. Is it the most intellectual or realistic examination of these issues? No. But does it make for some damn fine, uplifting entertainment? You bet your ass it does. And no show does it better than the adventures of Captain Jean-Luc Picard and the crew of the Enterprise D on TNG. The series-long, dialogue-heavy episodes rely more on engaging writing and thought-provoking ideas than spectacle or action to keep your attention. Performed by a crew of seasoned, mature professionals who work together with trust and militaristic discipline to get the damn job done every time, and it's beautiful to behold. We see season after season of their adventures play out as they grow together and bond, as the crew also becomes like our extended family, getting you even more invested in their lives and struggles. And since you all know how much I hate going on and on about a subject, instead I'll show you why I love TNG with my top 11 episodes. And if you're wondering, why top 11?
Because I like to go one step beyond.
And also because as I was making up my list, I had 11 favorites, so that's what we're going with. And one thing to note, recently there has been a resurgence of new Trek content, with one show even directly continuing the continuity of TNG. That sounds relevant, lucky us!
Jean-Luc Picard is back.
So, how have they been as an expansion of this beloved universe? Let's take a look.
How does it feel to have lived long enough to see all of your favorite franchises go down in flames?
Feels great.
Yeah, I gave many of these new entries a try, but like many of the Trek movies, I found them to have very little of what I love about the old shows. So, for purposes of canonicity, I'm just going to ignore them.
Sheer hubris.
They obviously were made with very different priorities, with far too much cashing in on lore and character arcs that had organically grown over seasons of painstaking development for what amounts to some cheap big screen drama. We'll be considering them all apocrypha and just focusing on the main show, unless of course we want to reference them for purposes of mockery. So as far as we're concerned, Generations? Didn't happen. Nemesis? Didn't happen. Picard?
Sheer hubris.
Haha, that definitely didn't happen. You can't just put on the skin suit of a once beloved series while fundamentally changing what's within and expect people to care as if it's all the same, right? Seems to me that would be
sheer hubris.
Instead of all that, let's talk about a show that so many have loved for decades, spanning 7 seasons jam-packed with great content. Show you why I love it, and maybe even convince you to give it a try. So let's dive in and talk about the top 11 episodes of the greatest work of sci-fi ever made that stars Brent Spiner and isn't Independence Day. Star Trek: The Next Generation. No, wait, sorry, that's the wrong one. Play the other one. Number 11, Season 4, Episode 22, Half a Life. In case you aren't familiar with Trek lore, the Prime Directive is the first principle of Starfleet that states that no member will unduly interfere with a culture or civilization outside the Federation. It's a complicated policy with far-reaching moral implications, and it sure makes for some great drama. Enter Half a Life, without a doubt my favorite Prime Directive episode, in which one Lwaxana Troi meets the distinguished scientist Dr. Timicin, with whom she immediately begins a romance, with just one little issue. You see, Timicin is about to have his 60th birthday, which, on his planet, means that he will be expected to commit ritual suicide, with the added wrinkle that the experiments he's conducting are meant to save his world from the death of their star in a few short decades. And if he's dead, he won't exactly be able to help on that front. Now, with TNG, everybody always talks about hating Wesley Crusher.
Shut up, Wesley.
But if you ask me, the real Wesley was always Lwaxana Troi. Certified thought who never shuts up, constantly using her Betazoid mind-reading abilities to embarrass the people around her. So yeah, she was probably my most hated character until this episode. She and Timicin debate this practice of suicide known as the Resolution, which seems antiquated and barbaric, but had previously saved Timicin's people in a time of crisis and shaped their society ever since. After some flip-flopping, Timicin's daughter reminds him of how important this practice is to their people, with even Lwaxana questioning whether her arguments weren't ultimately self-serving, asking him to forsake his people just for her, and in the end, he decides to go through with his resolution. Half a Life raises interesting questions about how we handle the end of life in society, but even more so is a perfect examination of the wisdom of the Prime Directive, demonstrating the limits of the Federation's ability to impose its morality on other cultures. And Lwaxana's slow acceptance of this is a perfect vehicle for us to see it in action. She shows real selflessness by accepting Timicin's decision even when she strongly disagrees with it, and it is deeply endearing. Maybe she's not such a Wesley after all. Number 10, Season 5, Episode 2, Darmok. Now here's a fascinating premise, with the Enterprise on a mission to establish communications with an impenetrable race known as the Tamarians, when suddenly Picard and the captain of the other ship are beamed down to the planet's surface, with the Tamarians blocking any attempts to rescue them. Now our crew is in a race against time to figure out the intent of the Tamarians, save Captain Picard, and avoid sparking a war with this powerful new race they cannot understand. If there is one episode here I recommend you watch without spoilers, it would be this one because of its unique structure. But here's the deal. This episode is all about one thing: communication. The Enterprise crew has no idea what the intentions of the Tamarians are, and many of their actions seem overtly hostile. Until you realize that, in reality, what they're doing is simply trying to find some way to communicate. Once you understand that, a rewatch of the episode reads totally differently, and you can easily understand the feelings being conveyed. You've got to give credit to the actors who played the Tamarians because they totally nailed it. The episode is famous for the Darmok en Jalad at Tanagra lines, which is one saying from the Tamarian language that at first means nothing to us, until it's understood that they use metaphors to represent abstract ideas pertaining to historical events. So, for example, Darmok en Jalad at Tanagra refers to an event of two historical figures meeting on an island, which is meant to convey the idea of cooperation, as the Tamarians were attempting to establish with the Enterprise. I have no doubt linguists absolutely coom to this episode, since the viewer gets a practical crash course in a new language within the 45 minutes of the episode. And by the end, when Picard is finally able to speak with the Tamarians and tell them what's what, it's a perfect example of Sigma male diplomatic badassery. Fantastic episode, and one for the history books.
Temba. His arms open.
Temba. At rest.
Thank you.
Number 9, Season 4, Episode 2, Family. The crew is getting some shore leave to recuperate after a traumatic event where Picard was famously captured and assimilated into the Borg, a terrifying biomechanical hive mind race. They used his vast knowledge of the Federation to launch an attack with thousands of lives being lost before they were able to stop them and rescue Picard. In the wake of this, for the first time in 2 decades, Picard decides to return to his hometown on Earth in France to see his family. There's other family drama in the episode with Worf and Wesley, which are also good, but really this episode is about our captain. Picard arrives at his ancestral home still processing the immense trauma he's suffered, and finds himself questioning whether he wants to continue commanding a starship at all. Trying to regain bearings on his life, he instinctively seeks them out from his family, especially his older brother Robert. The two have never gotten along, reviving old arguments about the value of technological progress, but ultimately Robert helps his little brother remember who he is and forgive himself for what he's done the way only a brother can. Yep, that's the way. It's heartwarming to see how the brutal trauma done to Picard could be a catalyst for him to strengthen the fraying ties with his loved ones. The story showcases the hard-to-quantify value of family, no matter what century you're in, and has a beautiful ending with Robert, the old curmudgeon, encouraging his son Rene to not just be tied to the old ways, but dream of becoming a Starfleet officer like his legendary uncle, or whatever wondrous future he might imagine.
It's getting late.
Yeah. But let him dream.
We actually get an update as to what that future might be for Robert and Rene in the movie Star Trek Generations. Let's see how they're doing.
Robert and Rene, they're burned to death in the fire.
And that's why we love the movies.
These things happen.
Number 8. Season 4, Episode 21, The Drumhead. When a visiting Klingon is exposed for leaking Federation secrets to longtime enemy the Romulans, an investigation begins to weed out any other traitors. As these kind of investigations go, they do unearth some questionable facts, namely one staff member who claims Vulcan heritage, but is revealed to, in fact, be part Romulan. This leads to widespread assumptions of his involvement in a conspiracy, with Picard questioning whether a lie about one's ancestry really implies any further guilt. Wild accusations begin to fly, with Picard attempting to restrain the situation until he too is accused of involvement in an unproven conspiracy. After all, he was once a Borg that led an attack on Earth. How could we ever know where his allegiances truly lie? This sets the stage for one of the classic Picard morality lectures that has gone down in history, about the tyranny of using suspicion as an excuse to deny freedom or the rights of the accused, how any criminal investigation should be based solely on principle and the rule of law, and that to do otherwise ultimately harms the entire society.
You know, there are some words I've known since I was a schoolboy. With the first link, the chain is forged. The first speech censured, the first thought forbidden, the first freedom denied, chains us all irrevocably.
Funny enough, it's not actually Picard's argument that does the trick here, but the fact that he's quoting the words of his accuser's father, a famous Starfleet judge. And his daughter's extreme reaction to having her father quoted to question her actions convinces everyone, including the people with authority, that all of this needs to stop now. It's a brilliantly written piece, showing how the best of intentions can be used for injustice, and how a climate of fear can always allow tyrants to rise. Lucky for the 24th century, the boys in Starfleet are there to keep him in check.
Vigilance, Mr. Worf. That is the price we have to continually pay.
Number 7. Season 6, Episode 10 and 11, Chain of Command. Our first two-parter on the list, we did it. In it, Picard is sent on a secret mission to investigate a potential doomsday device made by the Cardassians, a devious militaristic people, while command of the Enterprise is transferred to one Captain Jellicoe. The crew is having some trouble adjusting to their new captain, having gotten a little too comfortable under Picard. But the Enterprise is a Starfleet vessel, and Jellicoe reminds them of the values of discipline and respect for the chain of command that undergird the organization. Meanwhile, Picard's mission turns out to be a Cardassian trap set up to capture him and obtain Federation secrets. It was brilliantly done, worthy of our friends in the Obsidian Order, by forcing Picard to give up political protection in order to avoid a larger conflict between Cardassia and the Federation. which, unfortunately for him, means it's torture time. We get a front row seat to Picard's dehumanization as the Cardassians attempt to break him mentally, including the famous "how many lights do you see" routine. They are more than willing to push Picard past the point of no return, even if it doesn't yield any further information. That's how little they care for his life. Back on the Enterprise, Big Dick Jellicoe and the crew manage to completely turn the tables on the Cardassians, forcing them to concede to their demands, including returning Picard. Jellicoe really was the right man for the job, and Picard owes him his life. One little detail I love is the continuity in how after Jellicoe chews out Troy for not abiding by Starfleet dress code, in subsequent episodes we see her wearing her uniform much more often in addition to taking her rank more seriously, a sign that even she found that Jellicoe's preference for formality might have some merit. Ultimately, Picard is returned with a fresh batch of trauma. He never gave in to the torment, but he was right on the edge, and if it could break him, it could break any of us. The moral of the story? Torture? Big cringe.
There are 4 lights!
Number 6. Season 5, Episode 25, The Inner Light. Encountering a mysterious space probe, suddenly a beam shoots out, hitting Picard, who awakens on an alien world, greeted by a wife he's never seen before, with, apparently, an entirely different identity. His wife claims he's awoken from a terrible fever that could explain his odd memories of being a starship captain, and Picard can't find any evidence of how he got here, especially since the technology of the world, known as Catan, is limited, with no form of space travel. We cut back and forth from a seemingly unconscious Picard on the Enterprise to his new life on Catan, where years and decades begin to pass. He lives out a full life, making friends and having a family with his wife, while at the same time watching the planet itself slowly die as the natural conditions deteriorate. Eventually, we see him as an old man, gathered with his family to watch the launch of a rocket, which turns out to be carrying the very probe that hit Picard on the Enterprise to begin with, revealing that this whole experience has been a simulation designed to preserve the memory of Catan's long-dead culture by delivering those memories into an outsider's mind, and Picard was the lucky recipient. The way this episode plays with your heart and endears you to the friends Picard has on Catan is powerful stuff. And seeing the isolated captain who always hated children changed by his loving wife, and finding fulfillment in a family, only to have them all vanish, it really hits you. He even learns to play the flute during his time on Catan, a skill that carries over into reality, with the one physical relic they find being that flute, which becomes a treasured keepsake. Even if the life he lived wasn't real, the effects on Picard certainly are. An extremely good episode, with a memorable enough premise to be frequently parodied, including by everybody's favorite man-boy duo.
Here, check this out.
Roy, what's wrong?
I had a nightmare. I was with an old man.
Shit! Oh, what the hell?
Leave it to the smartest show ever made to improve on more basic sci-fi.
I'm Pickle Rick!
Number 5. Season 5, Episode 23, I, Borg. After finding a surviving Borg drone in a crash site, pretty much the rest of the episode is dedicated to deciding what the hell to do with it. Picard's already had his experience with the Borg, so he, along with the rest of the crew, has plenty of reason to want this thing terminated. However, to their surprise, once cut off from the collective, the Borg begins to demonstrate real signs of individuality, even accepting being given the name Hugh. They also talk assimilation, which Hugh sees as a good thing, not understanding why a species would resist being added to the Borg. But once Geordi explains the value the Federation puts on individuality and self-determination, Hugh begins to wonder if assimilation is always the right choice.
Resistance is not futile.
In my favorite scene, Picard even resumes his Borg identity of Locutus to bait out Hugh's evil Borg nature. But Hugh shows that he legitimately does not wish to harm the friends he's made or assimilate them against their will. They have an opportunity to use Hugh as a weapon to destroy the Borg outright, but even Picard comes to question if they have the right to genocide this entire species now that there's hope they might change. So they return Hugh to the collective, hoping that his newfound individuality might at least have a positive impact on the whole. This episode pits Starfleet's purported respect for all life against its own self-interest, with Picard in particular fighting his vengeful instincts. It's an extremely optimistic episode, something I like in my sci-fi. And while it is pretty narratively convenient that the Borg haven't made it a practice to, say, cut out the individuality from their drones' brains so they don't have this kind of vulnerability, which might force Picard to seriously consider wiping them all out, the point of the story is to show a hopeful path our heroes find by sticking with their principles. And I'll be damned if I don't love them for it. Whether it was the right move or their idealism allowed their one chance to slip away, time will tell. And here it is at number 4, Season 3, Episode 26, and Season 4, Episode 1, The Best of Both Worlds. Things had been building to this for a long time, with the Borg threat first teased in the Season 2 episode Q Who, where the omnipotent Q threw the Enterprise directly into them, accelerating the Borg's arrival in Federation territory to now. The story is framed around number 1 in our hearts, Commander Riker, who's turned down yet another command opportunity, and is beginning to wonder if he's grown too comfortable as second in command when the Enterprise finally re-encounters the Borg. Still no match for the collective, Picard is taken and assimilated, becoming Locutus, giving the Borg access to all his knowledge and wisdom, with Riker forced to take command, face off against his mentor, and finally become the man he was always meant to be. It's an absolute thrill ride of a story as the Enterprise scrambles to find some way to hold off the Borg, who proceed directly towards Earth, tearing through an entire fleet at the legendary Battle of Wolf 359, with only the Enterprise left to stop them. Ultimately, Riker finds a way to distract the Borg in battle while they rescue Picard, and use his connection to the collective to force them into stasis, saving the Earth from imminent destruction, and honestly becoming one of the greatest heroes in the history of the Federation. Over the course of the story, going from this Riker, to this Riker, to this Riker, the sheer magnitude of these events make it the biggest moment in the entire show, going down in the annals of sci-fi history. Yeah, it's good. Number 3, Season 3, Episode 16, The Offspring. It's a well-known fact among me that the android Data is, in fact, the best character in all of Star Trek. Picard, Kirk, Spock, Sisko, Neelix. There are many great characters throughout Trek, but none of them better serves the role of examining the human condition than the Tin Man who just wants to be human, Data. In furtherance of that goal, in this episode, Data attempts his version of reproduction by constructing a new sentient android based on his own design that he considers his child. Previous episodes have explored Data's sentience and confirmed that he is deserving of the rights the Federation grants all sentient forms of life. And while there is great interest in constructing more of the Soong-type androids, of which Data is the only remaining one, so far no one has been successful in doing so. But, armed with some new research, Data decides to pull the trigger himself, creating the child, Lal. Lal has her own strengths and weaknesses, but in some ways she even begins to outperform her father. And though he lacks the capacity for emotion, you can feel Data's pride in his child when it happens.
You have used a verbal contraction.
You said I've instead of I have.
It is a skill my program has never mastered.
The news of Lal's existence spreads quickly and leads to a debate as to whether she should be left with her father, like any other child, or separated from him for her own good. Tragically, the debate is made moot when Lal begins to develop emotions, something Data didn't anticipate, which leads to a catastrophic systems failure, with Data ultimately forced to terminate the life of his own daughter.
Thank you for my life.
There's no question for me that this is the emotional peak of the entire series. The timeless tale of a parent's love for their child and the tragedy of losing them, delivered through the vehicle of one android's quest to not be alone anymore. I feel so sorry for this beautiful metal man! Number 2, Season 2, Episode 9, The Measure of a Man. Yep, it's back-to-back Data stories, with this really being the definitive one. It's an episode you probably know about, even if you haven't seen it. Until this episode, it was something of an open question as to the exact nature of Data's existence and sentience, with even members of the crew questioning how much of a person he really is. After all, passing the Turing test is one thing, but being an actual life form is very much another. This becomes the topic of the hour when cyberneticist Bruce Maddox appears, demanding Data submit to disassembly so they can study his design and potentially create more androids like him, on the grounds that he cannot refuse as he is actually the property of Starfleet. Data is left with no alternative but to defend his rights in court, with Picard arguing the case on his behalf, and due to staffing shortages, who else but Riker forced to argue for the prosecution. Oh god, Data, there's no way we can win! Riker points out all the ways that Data is in fact a machine, but in unquestionably the greatest Picard speech of all time. The captain lays down the law on how Data's differences from organic life have no bearing on his demonstrable traits of intelligence, self-awareness, and consciousness that amount to personhood. In particular, he points out the risk that, if they were to decide this case wrongly, turning Data into property and mass-producing copies, they could be creating an entire race of slaves, which is generally one of the things the Federation tries to avoid. The judge agrees, and Data's personhood is legally settled, with as much right to live his life freely as any man. What I love about the ending is how, despite all this argumentation that potentially threatened Data's life, he still respects Maddox's goal and encourages him to continue his work, with Maddox in turn reevaluating his assumptions about Data and recognizing him as an individual. There were no true villains here, just philosophical disagreement, and this episode is a beautiful depiction of how people of goodwill can battle with their ideas to ultimately come away with the truth.
It is the ruling of this court that Lieutenant Commander Data has the freedom to choose.
Now, before we get to our number one spot, let's show a couple of honorary mentions that didn't quite make the cut. In no particular order, Season 4, Episode 15, First Contact. A fascinating Prime Directive episode where we see things from the perspective of the developing world, including how terrifying First Contact from the Federation can look when it goes wrong. Season 6, Episode 16, Birthright, Part 1. The overarching Worf plot is fine, but it's the story of Data discovering his capacity to dream and the psychedelic visuals we see as he takes another step toward humanity that's some of the best, most creative stuff in the series. Season 3, Episode 15, Yesterday's Enterprise. A radical, time travel, alternate dimension war story that gives Tasha Yar, the original Chief of Security, a more honorable send-off than her embarrassing death in Season 1. That is until we find out she was captured and bred by the Romulans, but don't worry about that part. Season 6, Episode 15, Tapestry. A trippy near-death experience episode where Q gives Picard a chance to relive his youth and undo past mistakes with his acquired wisdom, only for him to discover how those mistakes were a vital part of his development into the bold captain we all love. Season 4, Episode 11, Data's Day. A view into one single day following our beloved Data as he goes about his duties, framed as a letter written to our old friend, Commander Maddox. There's some light drama, a Romulan plot or two, but mostly it's a pure injection of that sweet Data innocence I crave. Season 3, Episode 21, Hollow Pursuits, where we meet the other best Trek character, Lieutenant Reginald Barclay, a timid engineer who copes with his lack of social graces by acting out his fantasies of being a Giga Chad on the holodeck, which on some level, I think we can all understand. Instead of giving up on him, with patience and support, the crew helps him to face reality and live up to his potential as a valuable Starfleet officer. Season 1, Episode 6, Where No One Has Gone Before. That's right, a Season 1 episode, which, while being the single biggest offender of sucking Wesley Crusher's dick, I still love it for the sheer spectacle as the Enterprise accidentally travels outside the boundaries of the universe into a realm where thought becomes reality. And it's spooky. And lastly, Season 6, Episode 19, Lessons, where Picard has his first real romance, and seems to be coming out of his shell, even sharing his flute playing from the inner light with his new lady, but ultimately being forced to cut things off, as his feelings for her compromise his ability to command, leaving the captain to contemplate what might have been. And just for fun, let's throw in the worst episode of the show, which is, without question, Season 6, Episode 7, Rascals. A god-awful story where a transporter accident turns several of the crew members, including the captain, into children. Even the show writers are embarrassed of this one and its nonsensical plot, as we are treated to a charming and wacky episode filled with child actors that unironically uses kid power as the main force to retake the Enterprise after a Ferengi invasion. One of the writers noted how they needed to use the Ferengi as the villains because you couldn't imagine a more serious race like the Cardassians losing to children. But personally, I'd pay dearly to see that version of the episode.
Stop it, you hurt me! I want my father! I want my father!
And finally, we come to my #1 pick for the best episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. Season 7, episodes 25 and 26, the series finale, All Good Things. This episode has it all. Sci-fi mystery plot, spatial anomalies, time travel, interplanetary politics, and all our favorite characters, wrapped up in a celebration of the entire show, even bringing back characters like Tasha Yar we lost along the way for one last hurrah. The plot follows Picard as he finds himself slipping through time a la Slaughterhouse-5, at first implying we might simply be seeing an elderly Picard losing his mind, but eventually proving to be another test from the Q to demonstrate the potential of humanity. Ultimately, Picard uses multi-temporal thinking between timelines to neutralize a phenomenon of anti-time that almost destroys the human race, showing there are sparks of evolution yet to be found in the mind of mankind. Of particular interest is the future timeline where we get a glimpse of what might become of the crew 25 years later, with, for example, Picard retiring to his family vineyard and Data advancing into humanity and becoming a professor. It's not all gravy, with Worf and Riker losing their friendship and Troy dying along the way, but overall, it's still a hopeful vision for the future, with the Federation remaining strong and many of our crew achieving their dreams. I mean, who's really gonna miss Troy, am I right? But of course, the point is how, knowing the mistakes that were made, the crew can work to avoid them, strengthening friendships in the here and now and avoiding future disasters to keep our little family together, with Picard himself, for the very first time, joining in on the series' staple poker game. I also love how this story was crafted as a bookend to the series, opposite the very first episode of the show, Encounter at Farpoint, where Q began a trial of humanity that continues here. We've known throughout the show that Q was keeping an eye on Picard, but his ongoing advocacy for humanity, along with the ominous ending implying how much farther there is to go, tie in perfectly to that hopeful view of the future in this series that has always been about discovery and exploring the unknown. I take this ongoing trial concept to simply be a statement of what's been clear throughout the show, that the temptation to do wrong will always exist in man where free will remains, but that through vigilance, we have the capacity to resist it. And we've got 7 seasons of story saying there are good people like our crew fighting for the cause. It really is a beautiful vision for what might come next. And boy, I sure hope they don't ruin that in any future stories.
Robert and Renee there, burned to death in the fire. Am I dead?
Yes, Captain.
This final episode, along with several others, introduced us to all kinds of possible timelines where things have gone wrong. So I don't see why we can't think of all the spin-offs and sequels that cock things up as any different. I mean, for Christ's sake, it's in the name. The point is that things do end, and this is the place to call it. Call me crazy, but I'd rather say goodbye to a show while still hungry for more, rather than see its legacy puppeted along and turned into something else. The true end of this story will always be All Good Things. It's a celebration of everything that made the series great with an eye toward the future. And that is why it is my favorite episode of this incredible show.
It's time to put an end to your trek through the stars.
Well, there you have it, folks, the top 11 best episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation. Now that we know a little bit more about the galaxy, why don't we ask the people what they think about the state of the Federation and the Quadrant in a little segment we like to call Starfleet on the Street.
Starfleet on the Street!
Let's go! How do you feel about Klingons?
What's a Klingon?
They look scary at first, but you know, I guess they're chill.
Worf's a pretty alright guy, right?
Yeah.
Good and bad.
So mixed. There's a mixture.
Good when you need them, bad when you don't.
How do you feel about Klingons?
Like Kirk would say, kill them all. Oh, that's a bad joke. We all know that one, right? I'm not going to tell it.
What's your favorite Ferengi rule of acquisition?
Number 3.
Always give a gift when greeting others.
A Ferengi would never say that. Obviously, the best one is Rule 102. Nature decays, but Latinum is forever. Right here. Yeah! Do you think we did the right thing by making peace with those slippery shapeshifters in the Dominion?
I don't know. That's kind of a leading question.
Do you think President Jaresh is doing a good job, or is he a little too alien to handle the big desk?
I'd rather not get into politics. I think we should let him do his best.
Even with the changeling threat, still
boot him out
consistent.
of office.
That's my man. That's right. Boot him out of office. Get out of here, Jaresh. Now, this is going back a ways, but in the fight between Captain Kirk and the Gorn, tomfoolery aside, who was the better fighter?
Gorn. I mean, obviously Captain Kirk.
Should we continue to care about the extremely likely dead Voyager crew in the Delta Quadrant?
Absolutely not.
They should just let them float in space as a memorial, like they did to USS Arizona.
What do you prefer, Star Trek or Star Wars?
Probably Star Wars.
Fire photon torpedoes. Should we quantum torpedo the Q continuum before they can destroy us all?
Yes.
Definitely, yeah.
That raises a lot of ethical questions.
But yes.
But yes.
There you go. All right. Should the Bajorans be allowed to join the Federation, or are those ridges too repulsive?
I say let them join.
Yeah, a little too repulsive. Definitely not going to happen.
Ugly people are fine,
but these aren't people. These are lowly aliens. Bajorans. Yeah. Lord forgive me for saying the word. What's your favorite thing about living in the future? Now that we've solved all human want with replicators and stuff, what do you do with your time?
Probably progress even more into the future. You keep building and building, you know?
And nuke the Q continuum.
I guess, yes.
Living in the future is kind of surreal. It reminds me of the past too much.
We're not living in the future. We're living in the present.
Someone's in a time paradox, because canonically, this interview is happening in the 24th century.
Not really.
He's delusional over here.
As long as you guys are having fun, and I like your pajamas.
Thank you.
I would probably say the fact that, there's no hunger. There's still war, but there's probably more peace than there's anything else.
Well, we can't let the Romulans get away with it now, can we?
Well, the Romulans eventually fall by the wayside.
I don't consider that canon, personally. What's your favorite part of Star Trek?
The spaceships.
What's your favorite part of Star Trek? TNG, the original series, DS9?
Probably the original. My dad used to watch that, so I'd watch it with him. So.
And you said they had a Star Trek wedding, right?
Yes, my mom, yes, she did, and my stepfather.
Was this a Klingon wedding, like a Federation wedding?
I wouldn't say that, but there are definitely Klingons there. The Borg was there. They had the chibble little thing?
Oh, the Tribbles.
Yeah,
Tribbles.
That
That's beautiful.
I don't know what the episode's called, but it's one with the space hippies, where they go to the planet and they're looking for Eden. They find the ship floating, and they're all the hippies, and they call Kirk Harold or something. He's a square.
Oh, Herbert, you are stiff.
And when they get to find the planet that they find, they end up finding out all the plant's life and everything's toxic. It burns their feet. You eat the fruit, you die, and get back on the ship. That's my favorite one, because it's space hippies,
What's your favorite Star Trek movie?
Wrath of Khan.
Khan! Well, thanks for watching this episode of Starfleet on the Street. Now, if you'll excuse me. Scotty, you're still canonically alive, right? Beam me out. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoy my work trekking through the stars, it'd be mighty kind of you to support it on Patreon or Subscribestar, where you can pledge a couple dollars and get access to my Discord and an exclusive little show called the BGE Monthly Cast. You can also help me and yourself by signing up for NordVPN. It anonymizes and protects your online traffic from miscreants and busybodies without collecting or sharing any of your data. I used NordVPN for years before teaming up with them, and if you sign up today, you can get 73% off the 2-year plan plus 4 extra months free. So click the link in the description and be sure to use the coupon code BestGuyEver to get the deal and so they know who sent you. As usual, I will be doing a stream today talking about the video and whatever else we want on twitch.tv/definitelybestguyever at 6 p.m. EST. So come stop by. Links to everything below. Thanks again for watching, see you next time, and live long and prosper. All right, hit me with a nerve pinch. Oh no, I'm dead.